Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we have the mysterious cat Mittens versus 14-year-old Magnus Carlsen, the best chess player of our era. Let's see how this goes. So we've got Magnus with the white pieces because Mittens can be a beast. We got d4 from Magnus and d6 from Mittens. The pure defense. So they go on, they play quite a bit of theory here. And we get set up like this, where Mittens is getting ready to castle with a fianchettoed bishop, the knight here. And he's got a lot of space on the queen side. You know, he can push at any moment, try to break open the center. And Magnus has a solid structure here. Two bishops in the center of the board. His knight's out. He could castle long right now. He can develop the knight, castle short. He's got lots of options. But he goes for f3 here. Which to me looks weird, but I'm nowhere near Magnus level. I mean, obviously this just stops the knight or bishop from ever coming in, controlling these light squares. And Mittens castles. Magnus finishes his development here, and he hasn't decided which way he wants to castle, but that will come. Mittens strikes the center, asking what's up. And Magnus just ignores. He doesn't need to take this. Why would he? Opens up everything while his king's in the center, so he just castles. Takes. Looks like it's forking, but it would be a fork if that square was protected. He takes back. And then Mittens kicks the knight away. Says goodbye. Knight to e2. Stockfish says undevelop, go to the back rank, disconnect the rooks. Probably wants to rotate over here, but that's weird. So we get c5 from Mittens, completing this little pawn structure here. Nice little pawn chain. But his queenside development is pretty bad. But his king's very safe. Everything's super solid. Both of them are playing good. So we got knight to c6, developing behind the pawns. And it looks like Mittens wants to start attacking on the queen side. However, there is really not an attack right now because Magnus has all of these pieces here. His development is pretty much perfect. He brings the knight out to f4. It's just a good square. Mittens wouldn't want to play g5 here. Or maybe he would. I don't know. I'm higher than 1 elo, but 1 elo is secretly like 3,600. So we get a5. Mittens is going for an attack on the queen side. Magnus doesn't want any of that. He plays a4, stopping anything. En passant looks very ugly here, disconnecting these pawns, and also just then he takes, and there's nothing on this queen side. So the position's clogged over here pretty much. He's probably going to look for this. Actually, that's exactly what knight to e5 does. He's preparing this move because if he could play this, takes, wins a piece. Obviously, Magnus does not do that. He plops his bishop on b5. Yeah, b5. This is a great outpost. There's no pawns that can attack it, so Mittens will have to trade off the bishop for it, or get a knight somewheres, but there's not really anywheres for the knight to attack the bishop, so we see a bishop trade. Magnus takes, because if you let Mittens take and then take, he does get a pass pawn, but that's more of a weakness. And then it allows Mittens to advance the pawns down, and he would have a nice connect 4 pawn chain, and Magnus does not want any of that. So rook takes. Now we get queen to e2. Just attacks the rook, and it's pretty much all it really does. In my opinion, there's probably some ideas behind it. Mittens just retreats. Now we get rook to d1, attacking this weak pawn. Now if Magnus can get another attacker on that, it's potentially weak. There's also tactics like knight takes c5 here, because if he recaptures, rook takes. However, that's not really great because you're losing a piece and a rook, but I guess you get a pawn for it, and then this pawn will fall, so that would be good. Mittens doesn't go for that. He just moves out of the way so that there's no tactic here. Now Magnus reroutes the knight this way, going for this open square here because he can't push. And this is just a nice outpost. Applying pressure here, applying pressure here. If he gets here, this could fall potentially. So we get h6 from Mittens. Not sure what this move does. It stops anything from coming to this square, but yeah, I don't know. This high level chess. All right, so we get Mittens and Magnus both lining up on this E file, and they're pointing their cannons at each other. Magnus goes ahead and plays b3, connecting all of his pawns and not allowing for this b3 push, which could potentially be good down the line, but not there. Now we get g5. We're seeing the idea of h6 now. I'm assuming he didn't want to play this at the start because after the knight moves, the pawn would be attacked. And it's also just weak there without any backup. Now we see Magnus go to d3, attacking the knight. Mittens doesn't want to trade. He wants to keep all these pieces on the board so that he can eventually just beat the kid up. Now we get Magnus going f2, lining everything up on this file. Mittens reroutes all the way to the other side, probably sensing some kind of danger over here. And now we just take that nice square. And the bishop comes in, attacking the rook. And it's also just, it cannot be removed very easily. You need to trade a piece. And then he goes for bishop to d4, which is just asking for a trade. Magnus says, you can take my bishop if you want. I don't care. Just gets the knight out of the way. I don't even know where this knight wants to go. Probably to here, and then, yeah, probably to here to pressure the bishop, forcing it to take or retreat. I guess we'll see in a minute. Okay, the rook returns to that a6 square for some reason. And here we go. We see the knight to e2, attacking the bishop. Bishop either has to take the bishop and trade or retreat or not. So d5 from Mittens saying, I'm attacking your knight. Where's that knight going? And Magnus takes on d5. Stockfish wanted this, saying, you're going to be better. We got d takes, just retreat, gives up another pawn there, and then takes. And Stockfish thinks that Magnus is much better in this position. Now, what I'm seeing is a potential c4 push with takes, and then this pass pawn being very strong, but Stockfish is not convinced. This is protected also. Maybe a rook sack? No, I don't think that'd be good. Oh, you cannot. No, you can't take. Anyways, that doesn't happen. We get Magnus taking, and then we get Mittens trading that bishop off now. And Magnus takes back with the knight. And then queen takes, and before taking, because he doesn't have to take here, he takes the knight. Rook recaptures, and then Magnus takes Mittens' queen, and then, of course, you recapture because you'd just be down a whole queen if you did not take back, which would be absurd. So everything's pretty much equal. Well, the material's equal. Stockfish thinks that white is quite a bit better, like +1, so about a pawn better. But Mittens, is putting up a fight. Now Magnus loses all of his advantage here by going knight to e4. And the idea behind knight to e4 is probably that this rook does not really have much room to move. So Mittens goes e2, rook e2, and Magnus just says, all right, get out of here. Trades. Now we're getting into an endgame, and Magnus is known to be one of the best endgame players of all time. So, oh my gosh, you see the eval here? It's saying +3 for Magnus. He infiltrates, threatening to take the rook. So rook takes rook, knight takes, and then Mitten takes CB, and then we get CB. Now, apparently Magnus is just so much better here. And it's probably because how do you protect this pawn, right? After knight to b7, you cannot protect this pawn. And then Magnus is going to take, and he's going to have an outside pass pawn, probably somehow be able to come over here, freeze the pawns, and just gobble them all up. But, you activate your king, that's all right. Magnus knows what he's doing. Okay, knight is attacked, plays knight to b7, king e6. Magnus is up a pawn in an endgame. But he's making some inaccurate moves. He gets the knight out safely. Knight check. Goes back. The only move. And now we got h5. Magnus stops any kind of advancement. So these pawns cannot move. And now Mittens plays f6, which Stockfish does not like. And then we got Magnus rotating the knight back to this way. Probably to try and target some of these pawns. He's got a 2-on-1 over here. He's got a connected pass pawn. Not really how much. The king can protect this. So we get the king coming to d4, attacking the knight. Knight goes to f5. And then we got a mistake from Magnus, which apparently loses the whole advantage. What he should have played here was knight to e7. Now, I could not explain what the difference is, but apparently it's a huge difference. And now we got h4 coming in, banging on the door, asking Magnus, are you going to take? And then have these split pawns? Or are you going to let me take and just have 2-on-2? Of course, Magnus just leaves it because good chess players allow tension to stay, and he pushes his pass pawn. Mittens takes, recaptures, and now we got a stare down. They aren't touching, but you definitely want to wait for the right moment to push. So we got knight to h5. This knight really doesn't have very many good spots to move, but okay, we got g4 from Mittens. Magnus does not want to take and weaken these pawns, so he pushes f4 to check on the king. Now Mittens has to decide, does he want to come in here and try to fight for this? But if he does that, then Magnus might not, well, I guess he can't go here, but he's going to try and win this pawn. And then he's got an outside pass pawn with the king close and the other king very far away. So Mittens goes backwards, probably feeling the threat of this pawn, wanting to keep the king close, just in case. Now we got knight to g7, and then the king has to protect this pawn, because if this pawn falls, game over for sure. Now we got Magnus rotating his knight back over to the other side of the board, there, and Mittens here just goes back and forth. And Magnus says, no draw, no draw. I'm up a pawn. And now, instead of trying for over here, he starts running his pawn. Starts running his king to the other side of the board to target these pawns. And gives Mittens the pawn back. So now Mittens and Magnus both have pass pawns. Knight's on the other board. Magnus doesn't really have a way of getting at this weak pawn yet. But he pushes his pawn. And now king c6, only move. Otherwise this pawn is going to promote. And here's a nice little tactic that some of you guys would probably fall for and say, ooh, free knight. Free knight, free knight. But no, if you take this, you lose. Because that pawn is promoting. But of course, Mittens, being Mittens, one of the scariest cats of all time, plays the correct move and attacks the pawn, giving Magnus this other pawn. And now Mittens is actually the one with a passed pawn. And I guess Magnus has one as well, but this one's much closer to promoting. And now we got king to b6. The knight goes here, probably wanting to maneuver and then pick up this pawn. Or maybe he wants to be close to this pawn to stop it from promoting. Okay. Got the knights jumping around. And now the king comes closer. Knight to c4, stopping the pawn from going to b2. King up. And now we got king to c3, attacking this, protecting the knight, but this knight is also protecting that. However, Magnus has a passed pawn that he can run. Okay, so we got a check from Mittens, which just wins this pawn, gives this pawn. So Magnus takes, and now he threatens to win the other pawn, and this is looking like a draw. And yeah, so Magnus just jumps from b2 to d1 with his knight back and forth, while Mittens ran to the top of the board and walked his king to the edge, and then just walked back and forth for a repetition. We got 14-year-old Magnus Carlsen pulling off a draw against probably the best bot of all time, Mittens. Comment down below if you think that Prime Magnus would destroy this bot. After seeing this, I think you would. If you liked the video, please leave a like, comment, and of course, subscribe. I'll see you in another video.